At Thursday's House Judiciary Committee hearing, Ranking Member Jim Jordan ripped top Democrats' recent actions toward the Supreme Court, recalling Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer's verbal attacks on Justices Gorsuch and Kavanaugh. Jordan sought to tie Schumer's angry rhetoric to eventual violence. In the wake of the Dobbs decision, attacks on churches and crisis pregnancy centers occurred across the country. Jordan also assailed Democrats for attacks on Justices Thomas, Alito, and Kavanaugh. The hearing, led by Chairman Jerry Nadler and his fellow Democrats, was meant to address alleged politicking at the Supreme Court. Republicans repudiate Democrats' claims, stating that it is the left that has undermined Supreme Court legitimacy.
Opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. March 2020, on the steps of the Supreme Court, Senator Schumer said, quote, "I want to tell you, Gorsuch, I want to tell you, Kavanaugh, you have released the whirlwind, and you will pay the price. You won't know what hit you." April of last year, the Democrat chairman of the House Judiciary Committee introduced legislation to add 4 associate justices to the United States Supreme Court, to pack the court. May 2nd of this year, the draft opinion of the Dobbs decision was made public. The next day, May 3rd, the very next day, attacks on churches, crisis pregnancy centers begin. They occur around the country, and they continue for months. Over 100 churches, crisis pregnancy centers attacked since the leak of that opinion. Now, you know what they call all that? You know what all that's called? Intimidation. Threats against Justices Gorsuch and Kavanaugh, threats to pack the court, leaking of an opinion, and attacks on churches, a concerted effort by the left to intimidate the highest court in our land. And I didn't even mention the lies told about Justice Kavanaugh in 2018 during his confirmation process. I didn't mention when Senator Joe Biden and Senate Democrats drove Justice Alito's wife to tears during his confirmation hearing. And I didn't mention the Democrats on this committee who have for the last year attacked Justice Thomas and his wife. And now today, a hearing about 8-year-old secondhand hearsay. 8-year-old secondhand hearsay from a witness who for 18 years took money from pro-life donors, $30 million, and then this year, all of a sudden remembers, just weeks after the Dobbs leak happened, that 8 years ago, he heard that at a dinner party, Justice Alito told his guests that they would like the Hobby Lobby decision. Just now remembers that. Mr. Schenck wasn't there. Justice Alito said Mr. Schenk's story is not true. The dinner guest said Mr. Schenk's story is not true. The Supreme Court said Mr. Schenk's story is not true. Politico said, quote, "We spent several months, attempting to corroborate Schenk's claim, but were unable to locate anyone who heard about the decision from Alito or his wife before its release." Let me just say that part of that again. We were unable to locate anyone who heard about the decision from Alito before its release. And even the New York Times who broke the story, they said there are gaps in Mr. Schenk's account. Gaps in his account. That's liberal speak for this story doesn't add up. But I'll tell you something that did happen. The Dobbs draft opinion was in fact leaked, and it was made public on May 2nd, 2022. And after that leak, as I've said, dozens and dozens of churches were attacked. Dozens and dozens of pro-life crisis pregnancy centers were attacked. Protests occurred at Supreme Court justices' homes, and there was an assassination attempt on Justice Kavanaugh. But to date, in this Congress, not one hearing in the House Judiciary Committee about that leak. Not one hearing about the real leak, but here we are today at the end of the session having a hearing on the fake leak. From a witness whose story even the liberal press says, quote, "We were unable to locate anyone who can corroborate what he said." That's what we're doing. So I hope maybe in the last week or two of this session of Congress, maybe we can begin to look into what happened with the Dobbs decision, how that leak took place. I think that would be something that would merit our time and attention. I would also point out this, Mr. Chairman, before I yield back. We just got his testimony. We're supposed to get his testimony the night before. We just, at 12:20, we get his testimony for a 10 o'clock hearing. Been nice if we'd had that as well. With that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. I now recognize the chair of the Subcommittee on Courts, Intellectual Property and the Internet, The gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Johnson, for his opening statement.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Chairman,